This week, the fallout of Second Bull Run, a return to the Dakota War, and the start of a new campaign. While the second day of Second Bull Run was raging, Major General William Bull Nelson of the Union, with around 6,850 men in Richmond, Kentucky. Opposing him is Major General Edmund Kirby Smith with 6,500 men. Just before midday on the 29th, the Confederate advanced cavalry meets and skirmishes with Union skirmishers. Afternoon, the skirmishers are reinforced and the Confederates are forced to withdraw. General Mahone D. Manson of the Union takes his brigade and begins to advance towards the Confederates. Skirmishes briefly with General Patrick Claiborne, but the sun goes down before either side can achieve a decisive victory. Through the night, both sides are reinforced, and both Nelson and Smith near the battlefield. On the 30th, Major General Smith orders Brigadier General Claiborne to attack Manson's brigade head-on. Brigadier General Thomas Churchill will support Claiborne. The battle starts after artillery. Both sides are reinforced, but the Union left is looking a little weak. Mason shifts men to his left when Churchill's brigade leaves a ravine and slams into his right. Under the pressure, Mahone's men break. They fall back to their defenses in Rogerville, but are soon overrun. Nelson arrives on the scene and tries to rally his men. He is hit in the neck by something. Manson is captured. Nelson has to leave the battlefield now. The Confederates won a decisive victory, capturing over 4,300 Union soldiers, killing over 200, and wounding over 840. They only suffered 78 killed, 372 wounded, and 1 missing. They captured a brigade commander, and the cities of Lexington, Richmond, and Frankfort, which are all open. After the defeat of Major General John Pope on the fields of Bull Run, his army broke. After a conference of commanders, Pope agreed to withdraw to Washington, D.C. He then receives word from D.C., and ordered by Major General Henry Halleck, attack Lee. Pope is training at Centreville. He has 2 roads back to D.C., both of which lead to Germantown, Virginia. His position is disastrous. He has to reform his army while keeping Germantown. During the night of the 31st to the 1st, Pope receives 2 pieces of information: that the road from Centreville to Germantown was shelled, and that masses of infantry are seen north of Germantown, marching towards it. Pope can't wait. He has to move. On the morning of the 1st, Major General Edwin Sumner, commander of the 2nd Corps Army of the Potomac, sends a brigade to do reconnaissance of the enemy. The Union's cavalry is unable after the defeat at Bull Run. Major General Pope sends Major General Irvin McDowell with the 3rd Corps Army of Virginia to secure Germantown. Pope also sends 2 brigades of Brigadier General Isaac Stevens' division, Major General Josiah Rena's Corps, to stop any Confederate attack from the north against Germantown. There is light skirmishing from the morning till the afternoon. Where is Major General Thomas Stonewall Jackson? He is at Ox Hill, recovering from a nap. 3 p.m. Stephen with his division arrive at Ox Hill. He knows he's outnumbered, but he attacks anyways. Crushes it to Colonel Henry Strong's brigade of Louisians and sends it to the rout. He then crushes it into Isaac Trumbull's brigade, who is currently being led by Captain Brown, who is then killed, and the brigade goes into crisis. Not until Brigadier General Jubal Early counterattacks does the Union advance halt. It's been 2 hours of Union victories, and now it's turned to stalemate. And then a crack and a thud. Brigadier General Isaac Stevens was shot through the head, dead. Another crack sounds, this one of thunder, and rain pours down. Powder is now too wet to be used. The battle will be decided by the bayonet. Major General Philip Kearny with his division arrives and sees Stevens' brigade in chaos. He deploys his men on the left and orders an assault. It turns to stalemate again as Major General Ambrose P. Hill's division engages in hand-to-hand combat. Kearny rides to the front line to encourage his men to push, but soon realizes he's at the Confederate line, and he tries to fall back. One lucky Confederate uses enough dry powder to shoot Kearny and kill him. Reinforcements come to the Union. They covered general withdrawal. The battle was over. The Union suffered 1,300 casualties to the Confederates' 800, and it was a inconclusive Confederate tactical. What was this battle? Well, the Confederates did hold the field of fighting, but the main point of the battle was Germantown, which the Union held, at the cost of 2 divisional commanders to a captain. Jackson stopped any possible attack by Pope, not that there was one. The Union was able to escape. I lean towards Confederate victory, but some consider it inconclusive. Over the next several days, the army under Pope's command limps back to D.C. But it won't be Pope's army that returns. On September 2nd, President Abraham Lincoln gives Major General George B. McClellan the fortifications of Washington and all the troops for the defense of the capital. This is after his cabinet had told him not to. Our deliberate opinion that, at this time, it is not safe to entrust to Major General McClellan command of any army of the United States. Lincoln doesn't see any other choices. Major General Ambrose Burnside, who was consulted about taking over the army after the Peninsula Campaign, was again offered the position, but refused again. We must use what tools we have. There is no man in the army who can man these fortifications and lift these troops of ours into shape half as well as he. If he can't fight himself, he excels in making others ready to fight. McClellan is the only one available to reform the army. How much time does he have to whip these troops into shape? Not a lot, because as the same day McClellan is restored, there's another battle. Full General Robert.E.Lee is planning something, and that plan requires Loudoun County, Virginia, which is currently in Union hands. To capture it, the King of Spades sends Major General Jeb Stuart out, who in turn sends out Brigadier General Robertson with his brigade, who in turn sends out 2nd Virginia under Colonel Thomas T. Munford, who just recently been wounded at 2nd Bull Run. Munford then splits his command and gives a detachment to Captain Jesse Irvine Jr. to run through Leesburg, named after the famous Lee family that full General Lee is a part of. Those 180 soldiers are made up of 2 cavalry units, Major General Cole's Maryland Cavalry, Captain Samuel Means' Loudoun Rangers, who are all from the county. Irvine's men first run into Loudoun's Rangers, who just a few days earlier were seriously engaged with Confederate partisans. After a short engagement, the Rangers run to Major Cole, hoping to form a successful defense. Cole knows the area. He moves west to form a line, making it harder for Confederate sympathizing civilians to get involved. Irvine moves towards Cole's men. They are dismounted, but outnumber Irvine. Cole yells, "It's time to counterattack!" They hear another yell, a rebel yell. Munford appears in their rear. Pistols are fired from both sides. The Confederate cavalry closes in with sabers. The Union breaks and runs towards Waterford. It's a Confederate victory. Munford lost 2 dead, 6 wounded. The Federals unknown. 7 to 11 killed, 20 to 33 wounded, 15 to 47 captured. Resting on the 2nd, we turn to Minnesota and the Dakota War. There are many bodies left around from the conflict. It's improper. On the 31st, Sibley ordered 2 militia regiments, a good number of assistants, to move out of column and bury the dead. Civilians wishing to give a good burial to their family join. Leading this group is either Captain Hiram P. Grant or Major Joseph R. Brown. Grant and others at the time wrote saying he was in charge. But Captain Joseph Anderson, who was one of the militia commanders and of 70 cavalry, wrote that Brown was in charge. For days they successfully buried around 80 bodies without seeing any Sioux. On the night of the 1st, they encamped near the valley of Birch Coulee. All felt safe. Wagons were drawn up in a horseshoe, horses free to graze. No one had to be a sentry a mile away or dig ditches. Unbeknownst to the party, they weren't safe. 200 Dakota warriors led by Graybird, Mankato, Redlegs, and Big Eagle are closing in. For hours, scouts have been trailing them. 1 company ready for the taking. We felt sure we could capture it, and that 200 men would be enough for the undertaking. I had about 30 men. Nearly all the Indians had double-barreled shotguns, and we loaded them with buckshot and large bullets called trader's balls. After dark, we started, crossed the river and valley, went up the bluffs and on the prairie, and soon we saw the white tents and the wagons of the camp. We had no difficulty in surrounding the camp. The pickets were only a little way from it. I led my men up in the west through the grass and took up a position 200 yards from the camp, behind a small knoll or elevation. Redlegs took his men into the coulee east of the camp. Mankato, Blue Earth, had some of his men in the coulee, some on the prairie. Braybird and his men were mostly on the prairie. At 4:30 in the morning, a Minnesota soldier sees figures moving through the grass. He readies his weapon and fires. The Dakota realize they are discovered and begin their assault, killing around a tenth of the enemy's force, wounding a fifth and massacring the horses. The Minnesotans leap to their feet. If they aren't wounded or killed, they take position behind the dead horses. They slept with loaded pieces and resist the assault. Someone must ride out to Colonel Sibley and have him move with haste. There's only one horse left alive. The unscathed horse seemed to have a charmed life, and we clung to a faint hope that somebody might mount him and dash through the besieging braves to summon relief from Fort Ridgely. But the Indians concentrated their fire, and finally the poor beast crumpled and fell. Panic sets in, and 2 men leave the safety of the wagons. They are soon killed. It should be considered that our men were new recruits, nearly all ignorant as to the use of arms, and carrying army rifles which were strange to them. Not one of the guns ever having been fired at a target. Not over 3 shots had been fired by any one of our infantry force, and even these shots were not aimed at any definite object or target. The cavalry, though, under Anderson remained cool and calm. Major Brown is wounded. Anderson alone holds them together, only for the assaults to deteriorate into a siege. Some men begin to use bayonets and knives, and the only 4 shovels they have to dig battle works. The siege was one of conservation. Neither side wants to expend their ammunition, and the Minnesotans are also low on water and food. The men fought throughout the whole engagement without water and provisions, except 1/4 the hard cracker to each man and about 1 ounce of raw cabbage to a man, and joked each other freely in regard to their heavy diet. The Dakota's position is different. We had an easy time of it. We could crawl through the grass and into the coulee and get water when we wanted it. After a few hours, our women crossed the river and came up near the bluff and cooked for us. We could go back and eat and then return to the fight. We did not lose many men. Indeed, I only saw 2 dead Indians. I never heard that any more were killed. As the siege drags on, the Dakota are getting restless and begin speaking of an assault. Among the Minnesotans are those of Sioux descent and those who know the language. One of them even yells to the Dakota siegers, "You do very wrong to fire on us. We did not come out to fight. We only came out to bury the bodies of the white people you killed." Members of the Dakota war band yell to a Joseph Kersley, who's of mixed descent, "Hear me, Hinhakaga, we saw you shoot. You killed the son of Chief Traveling Hale. Now we will kill your little girls." These words deeply affect Kersley, who believed his 2 daughters dead. They are alive! A shot rings out, and a nearby militiaman dies. The Dakotas, instead of charging en masse, send out a single man under the white flag of truce. The Dakota spokesman speaks to Private James Ogway, a French-Canadian who lived with Dakotans. They tell Ogway to join the warband with all of the other half-breeds. Ogway goes to Grant, and this exchange follows. "Well, Ogway, what do you fellows intend to do? Go with the Indians or stay with us?" "Captain Grant, we want nothing to do with these Indians. We will stand by you, and fight as long as there is a man left. And I will now tell them so. We won't come over to you. We will stay with the soldiers, and if you come, we will kill you if we can. You are cowards to kill poor women and children, and if we catch you, we will treat you as you treated them." Grant then instructs Ogway to inform the Dakota that the camp has 200 men and are overflowing with supplies, a bold-faced lie. For some reason, Grant doesn't fully trust those of partially Sioux descent, as a Private Connolly recalls. "We did not know whether we could trust the half-breeds or not, and were instructed to fire on them to kill if they made the slightest move to desert us." The Sioux messenger is then fired at, his horse killed. The warband, though, doesn't move in, and there is hope for the besieged. Colonel Henry H. Sibley has heard the sounds of battle, and dispatches nearly 250 men, of which 50 are cavalry, and a strong section of artillery. They arrive near sundown and move to the valley on the opposite side. Why? The relief party is led by Colonel Samuel McPhail, and an apt last name for a very cautious man. He believes he is surrounded. The besieging party tries to reinforce this belief. McPhail sends a messenger to Sibley asking for more men. The battle continues this time against McPhail. Mankato at once took some men from the coulee and went out to meet them. He told me he did not take more than 50, but he scattered them out, and they all yelled and made such a noise that the whites must have thought that there were a great many more, and they stopped on the prairie and began fighting. They had a cannon and used it, but it did no harm. Mankato flourished his men around so, and all the Indians in the coulee kept up a noise, and at last the whites began to fall back. They retreated about 2 miles and began to dig breastworks. Mankato followed them and left about 30 men to watch them, returned to the fight at the coulee with the rest. Things were laughing when they came back at the way they had deceived the white men, and we were all glad that the whites had not pushed forward and driven us away. When the men of this force began to fall back, the whites in the camp followed and made a great commotion, as if they were begging them to return and relieve them, and seemed much distressed that they did not. McPhail doesn't reinforce the besieged party, and Grant fears the Dakota are being reinforced by a force of nearly 500. They aren't. Later in the day, some of the men who had been left in the village came over on their horse to see what the trouble was that the camp had not been taken, nor about the prairie for a time. I do not think many of them got into the fight. I do not remember that we got many reinforcements that day. If we got any, must have come up the coulee, and I did not see them. Perhaps some horsemen came up the east side of the coulee, but I knew nothing about it. I am sure no reinforcements came to me. I did not need any. Our circle about the camp was rather small. We could only use a certain number of men. On the 3rd, Sibley arrives with the remainder of his force, which is bolstered by additional 2 companies that had just come from Fort Ridgely, and begins shelling the Dakota. The warband breaks off their attack, and the siege ends. Sibley sees 13 dead, all the horses gone, and 47 in a serious condition. During this time, Little Crow and Tucumani have burned down the towns of Hutchinson and Forest City to the very ground. It was brutal and bloody. Sibley is down a majority of his cavalry. The Sioux won and suffered more casualties than they received, and withdrew beyond pursuit. Sibley also withdraws and leaves a message. If Little Crow has any proposition to make, let him send a half-breed to me, and shall be protected in and out of my camp. Later on the 3rd, Fort Abercrombie, west of the state of Minnesota, is put to siege for 6 hours. In the end, only 1 defender is injured. Casualties amongst the Sioux are unknown. The same day, full General Robert.E.Lee writes this to Confederate President Jefferson Davis. Headquarters, Alexandria and Leesburg Road, near Drainesville, September 3rd, 1862. His Excellency, President Davis, Richmond, Virginia. Mr. President, the present seems to be the most propitious time since the commencement of the war for the Confederate Army to enter Maryland. The 2 grand armies of the United States that have been operating in Virginia, who now united, are much weakened and demoralized. The new levies, of which I understand 60,000 men have been posted in Washington, are not yet organized. It will take some time to prepare for the field. It's ever desired to give material aid to Maryland and afford her an opportunity of throwing off the oppression to which she is now subject. This would seem the most favorable. After the many had disappeared from the vicinity of Fairfax Courthouse, taking the road to Alexandria and Washington, I did not think it would be advantageous to follow him farther. I had no intention of attacking him in his fortification, not prepared to invest them. I possessed the necessary munitions to be unable to supply provisions for the troops. Therefore determined, while threatening the approaches to Washington, to draw troops into Loudon, where forage and some provisions can be obtained, menace their possession of the Shenandoah Valley, and, if found practicable, to cross into Maryland. The purpose, if discovered, will have the effect of carrying the enemy north of the Potomac, and, if prevented, will not result in much evil. The army is not properly equipped for an invasion of an enemy's territory. It lacks much of the material of war. It's feeble in transportation, the animals being much reduced, and the men are poorly provided with clothes, and in thousands of instances are destitute of shoes. Still, we cannot afford to be idle, and though weaker than our opponents in men and military equipments, must endeavor to harass if we cannot destroy them. I am aware that the movement is attended with much risk, yet I do not consider success impossible, so I will endeavor to guard it from loss. As long as the army of the enemy are employed on this frontier, I have no fears for the safety of Richmond. Yet I earnestly recommend that advantage be taken of this period of comparative safety to place its defenses both by land and water in the most perfect condition. A respectable force can be collected to defend its approaches by land. Now the steamer Richmond, I hope, is now ready to clean the river of hostile vessels. Should General Bragg find it practical to operate to advantage on his present frontier, his army, after leaving sufficient garrisons, could be advantageously employed opposing the overwhelming numbers, which it seems to be the intention of the enemy now to concentrate in Virginia. I have already been told by prisoners that some of Buell's cavalry have been joined to General Pope's army, and have reason to believe that the whole of McClellan, the larger portion of Burnside's and Cox's, the portion of the Hunters, are united to it. What occasions me most concern is the fear of getting out of ammunition. I beg you will instruct the Ordnance Department to spare no pains in manufacturing a sufficient amount of the best kind, and to be particular in preparing that for the artillery, to have 3 times as much of the long-range ammunition as of that for smoothbore or short-range guns. The point to which I desire the ammunition to be forwarded will be made known to the department in time. If the quartermaster's department can furnish any shoes, it would be the greatest relief. We have entered upon September, and the nights are becoming cool. I have the honor to be, with high respect, your obedient servant, R.E.Lee, General. On the 4th, old General Lee enters Leesburg. He looks across Potomac, and then enters Maryland. Then there is Sickles. The aftermath of Second Bull Run is devastating. The army gone, but all Sickles can see is the effect it has on the populace. New York, home to Horace Greeley, one of the creators of the Republican Party. It's looking copperhead. The election of 1862 is soon approaching. The Union doesn't have any major victories in the East to give to the Republican Party. The war might be over, not by the bayonet or bullet, but by the ballot box. That's where the week ends, and it ends with disaster. This week, the Union lost again at Bull Run, which was followed up by the losses at Chantilly. And Lee is now in Maryland. In Minnesota, there's no more cavalry, and the advance of Sibley has been stopped. And a new fort is under siege. And in the West, full General Braxton Bragg is marching towards the heart of Kentucky to destroy the Army of the Ohio. McClellan is now reforming the Army of the Potomac to stop the Army of Northern Virginia, and Sibley is waiting in Fort Ridgely for more men. The question is, will the enemies of the Union strike before they are ready or after? Hello, it's the entire Civil War Week by Week team here, and I'm pleased to announce I have created a Patreon. I'd like to thank Kevin Mack, who has already joined it. It means the world to me. I'm not saying that you should join. This entire production will go on without. It's just if you have the money, and only if you have the money, and you would like to give it to me, I would gladly accept it and forever be in your debt. Now for the normal things. If you liked the video, please like it. If you want to tell me how much you liked it, please comment. If you want to check out what has happened last week, you should be seeing that around now. If you really want to understand the war, you should be seeing a playlist about it right now. Thank you all, and I shall see you next week.